What's up, everybody? This is the Booch, and welcome to episode 11 of the Boochcast reviews Darkside of the Ring. And I am so excited to be back here because we've got another one for you today. And just like the ones that have come before it, quite a few of them, it is once again, we are deeply rooted in controversy on this one. So the big question is, who am I going to piss off next? Well, the only way to find out is to jump into it, and we've got Jimmy Snuka and the death of Nancy Argentino. So there's nothing left for us to do now but to get it started. Now, fans loved Jimmy Snuka from the moment he stepped into the WWF, and he was the pioneer of high-flying wrestling. He was one of the first wrestlers to jump off the top rope. You know, he did a lot of the high-flying moves that we see in wrestling today. He was very much a pioneer of that style. But unlike the crazy spot monkeys we see today in modern wrestling, Jimmy Snuka also had psychology. He knew when to be a high flyer and when not to be a high flyer. And when he did it, it was special, especially since no one had ever seen it before. And he was from the Fiji Islands, and he had the potential to be as big of a star as Hulk Hogan. He was originally a heel, but was way too popular and had to be a babyface that was managed by Buddy Rogers. Now, in this documentary, we see two main people being interviewed. Nancy's older sister, Lorraine Salome, as well as the Tonga Kid. And they talk mostly about Nancy as well. Nancy was intelligent. People were drawn to her. She always had a job, never gave her parents a hard time. She lived a very sheltered life and was innocent until she went to wrestling at Madison Square Garden. Her friend Ellen was engaged to Johnny Rodz, who's another wrestler from back in the day. And she met Jimmy backstage, Nancy did, and they fell in love. And that's how they met. And Jimmy would sit in the corner and wouldn't talk to anyone except for Nancy when he would go to, like, Nancy's house for, like, family reunions and stuff or visit the family. He wouldn't really talk to anybody else. Now, Nancy took care of him on the road when Buddy decided he didn't want to drive him from place to place anymore. Because at the time, Buddy Rogers was Jimmy's handler and chaperone. And Jimmy was a sweet guy, but he was hooked on cocaine and was out of control. So Buddy was like, I don't want to do this shit no more. So Nancy kind of took over. And Nancy basically drove the car, mapped out the route, and got him to the building on time, which is not unheard of in wrestling for wrestlers to have somebody with them, like a girlfriend or a wife, to be the person in charge of doing all that. Because you remember in the match made in heaven, we talked about how Miss Elizabeth and Linda Hogan used to be the ones that would take care of everything for Hulk and Randy. Make sure the gear is washed, make sure everything is set up, make sure everything is ready to go while the wrestlers rested. You know, they helped keep them, you know, on the straight and narrow path while they were out on the road, but occasionally took part in the fun as well. Now, Nancy's mother loved him despite being antisocial. But the stepfather had suspicions. So the stepfather already didn't like Jimmy. But the mother absolutely adored him. Then we talked to Louise Argentino, who's Nancy's other sister. And the parents were gone for the weekend, and they were eating Chinese food. And at one point, Jimmy lunged for her neck and said, I could, and gave a wrestling face. And Louise told Nancy immediately to get rid of him. Like, she was not comfortable around him. She said, no, he's just tired. He's had a long day, whatever. And Jimmy apparently felt bad about what he did and tried to give her cocaine as an apology, which, I'm not going to lie, is kind of fucking hilarious. You know, that Jimmy felt in his own way, if I give her some cocaine, maybe that would be it. But Jimmy apparently felt very, very bad about his behavior. You know, of course, when they were on the road, Nancy didn't see much of the other wrestlers because Jimmy protected her. Because as we mentioned before, the wrestlers at times can be immature children and savages and don't function well in regular society. And apparently Nancy didn't like Don Morocco who Jimmy was working with at the time, because at the time, Jimmy Snuka and Don Morocco had this epic rivalry, and they were selling out all over the world. So they were the big main event, going from town to town. And Nancy didn't like him because he knew Jimmy's wife, Sherry. You see, Jimmy was married, but was seeing Nancy on the side, and was able to keep both lives a secret on the road for years. Now, Jimmy and Sherry were married until about 1999 is when they finally got divorced. But during that time, Jimmy kind of had Nancy as like the side chick, and Sherry was the main chick. Then we talked to Kevin Ammerman, who's a journalist, and apparently Jimmy allegedly has Nancy by her hair and dragging her across the floor and wall. Jimmy had superhuman strength while being restrained by cops and a canine. Jimmy was arrested, and Nancy helped him to avoid jail time. She basically dropped the charges. So apparently Jimmy donates $1,500 to a local Ronald McDonald's house, pled guilty to a harassment charge, and was back on the road. Next, we talked to Adam Clark, who's a journalist who wrote the 30-year anniversary story of Jimmy Snuka and Nancy Argentino. Now, back in the day for the WWE, Allentown, Pennsylvania is where they shot TV back in the day. They had a show called Championship Wrestling. Jimmy and Don were headlining those shows, having strap matches, chain matches, and cage matches. And on May 10th, 1983, Jimmy leaves the lodge, films wrestling, comes back, and then leaves again and comes back at 9 p.m. A few hours later, ambulance shows up. Wrestlers show up to see yellow tape, police cars, ambulance. Jimmy's leaning against the police car looking scared. And they were, apparently, according to the report, they were wrestling a little bit too much the night before when he pushed her over and she hit her head. She came inside. They went to bed. He went to his wrestling match, came back. She was still conscious, but I guess was becoming a little bit lethargic or sleepy. So he said, "Let me go to my match. I'll check on you later." And then she wasn't responding when he came back. She was having difficulty breathing, and that's when he called the ambulance. Now, he's telling others the story. Every person there says Snuka mentioned shoving and striking, and he had physically pushed and struck Nancy, and she fell and hit her head. So that is the one thing that apparently remains a constant in the story. Now, the police interviewed Jimmy Snuka. He says that they stopped alongside of the road when they were coming to Allentown, and Nancy had to go to the bathroom. He says she gets out. There's a lot of trucks driving by, so he hollers at her to hurry up. And as she's trying to come back, she slips, she hits her head on the side of the road, and that's what caused the injuries. Now, the WWF finds out about Nancy's death. Vince tells the lieutenant that Snuka will continue to cooperate with the investigation, and his star performer is released without charge. Now, Jimmy went to the funeral and was crying. They had to pull him off the casket. And he actually said, "She looks terrible." Now, The Undertaker, and I got to stop here for a moment. When I say The Undertaker, I'm not talking about Mark Calloway. I am talking about the actual Undertaker at the funeral, the person who has the actual job of being an Undertaker. That's what I'm referring to. Because The Undertaker is not just a wrestling gimmick, that's also the job title of people who work in funeral homes. So the person working the funeral home is what I mean by Undertaker. I am not talking about Mark Calloway, because this is still the mid 1980s. Mark Calloway as the Undertaker does not exist yet. So the Undertaker comes over to the stepfather and said they had a hard time getting her to look good because she had a giant bruise on her neck and she had multiple cuts and abrasions all over her body. Now, a few weeks later, Snuka is back in the WWF. And Don Morocco said he was scared that Snuka would never come back and that he would lose main events and paydays. Because when you're working the main event, whether you're the champion or the challenger, regardless, you're still making big money. Now, granted, the champion is making more money, and Don Morocco was the champion at the time, but you're still making big money and you're still making big bucks. So even if you weren't going to win the title, just to have a match or a program with the champion was enough, because at least then you were getting very well compensated for what was happening. And then this was also the night that he leapt off the top of the cage, which is a classic moment in wrestling history. And a while back when I worked for the regular guys, I had the honor and privilege of interviewing Jimmy Superfly Snuka. And when I got the chance to interview him, I mentioned this moment and we talked about it. And what I found the most interesting about it was most people forget that Don Morocco won the match. The only thing people remember from that match is Jimmy Snuka jumping off the top of the cage. You don't remember the finish. You don't remember anything else in the match. No one talks about anything in the match. All they talk about is Jimmy jumping off of that cage. Because at that time, it had never been done before. The fans were witnessing something they'd never seen before. Now, jumping off the cage is pretty much the standard. Hell, we've seen people jump off the Hell in a Cell, get thrown off the Hell in a Cell. We've seen Shane McMahon jump off the Titantron. We've already seen some insane, crazy bumps get taken. We'd never seen anybody jump off the top of the cage. And it was also the moment that inspired Mick Foley to get in the ring and be a wrestler. And apparently there was some other wrestlers there as well. Like I think the Dudleys were there. I think Tommy Dreamer was there. There were a few other people in the audience at the Garden the night Snuka jumped off the cage. And it was a big moment. Then we cut to Carol Snuka, who's been Jimmy's wife for 20 years. Because after her and Sherry divorced in 99, he married Carol Snuka in 2004. And they stayed married up until his death. Carol would say that fans would yell, "You fucking murderer, when are you going to kill another girl?" And he would hear this all the time. And Jimmy said the haters didn't bother him because he said he knows what happened. And if they want to believe that, let them. And the sad part is, in this day and age, that's all you can do. Because whether you're guilty or innocent of a crime, if you are guilty in the court of public opinion, that's what's going to be said about you forever and ever. Because today, people don't care about the truth. People don't care about facts. In fact, I said it's probably going to be a time where I piss people off and something controversial. Here it is. The world is so fucked up today, and people care so much more about accusations than convictions. There's not really much of an incentive to be a good person anymore, period. There really isn't. Because even if you don't commit a crime, people can just lie and say you did, and that's enough to convince people if you're somebody that they just simply don't like. So when you don't like somebody, you'll believe anything bad that's said about them. If you love somebody, you'll defend them tooth and nail, even if all the evidence is put in front of you. Public opinion is the worst thing to fight. And the truth is, you can't. At the end of the day, whether it happened or not, Jimmy just has to accept that people are going to say that about him. That's all he can do. So next we cut to Frederick Conjure, the chief of police. He said they sent officers to Brooklyn to tell Nancy's family that it was being ruled as an accident. And Snuka's promoter said, "Sorry for your loss, and if $25,000 would help." The mother said, "Do you think my daughter's life is worth $25,000? So the family pursues a wrongful death lawsuit and gets awarded $500,000. Snuka never showed up or paid the money, so the family decided to just move on. Later, Jimmy got released from WWE after having multiple drug problems and just becoming unreliable and not making shows. He went to AWA and then went around the indie circuit for the rest of his career until WWE eventually would bring him back for other appearances and shit like that. But for the most part, he was working the indie circuit and doing autograph signings, where you're not doing anything except signing papers for people who remembered you when. But still, not a bad way to make money. I've seen plenty of wrestlers that literally go to events just to sign autographs and they still get paid their rate, but they also make extra money selling their gimmicks because people will still buy them. Then, in 2011, interest in solving the case was renewed. An autopsy report says the pattern is consistent with a moving head striking at a stationary object, but is not consistent with a single simple fall in view of multitudes of other scalp, facial, and bodily bruises and abrasions. It may be suggestive of mate abuse. I believe that the case should be investigated as a homicide until proven otherwise. Clothes have no evidence of dirt. He took her back to the hotel room, put her on the bed. That's what the autopsy said. Now, so when I say I believe, that's the coroner saying that, not me. So Snuka's autobiography addresses the incident. And of course, I know because I did read the autobiography, because at the time that I was interviewing Jimmy Snuka, he was promoting his book. So I read that book cover to cover and highlighted shit so I could figure out what good questions to ask Jimmy. Now, I'll be honest. When I interviewed Jimmy Snuka, I didn't say anything about Nancy Argentino. I'll be honest. I didn't bother to touch that. Some people might say that I should have, but ultimately, I was just there to talk with Jimmy and get a glimpse of his career and learn more about him. I was not the type of journalist or type of interviewer that wanted to, talk about controversial stuff back then. I was a guy who just wanted to interview a wrestler. I didn't care about his past, And whether or not I should have, that's another story for another day. Maybe if I was more experienced as an interviewer back then than I am now, I probably would have asked that question. But at the time, I didn't think to do it. I just wanted to talk to a wrestler. I didn't care about the past. Now, there's no transcript of the meeting with Vince McMahon and law enforcement. And the way he portrays the relationship with Nancy, he says Nancy ruined his life, denies he ever laid a hand on her, and Nancy was just an occasional girlfriend. And they show an interview from the Opie and Anthony show where he talked more about that. And it turns out the Tonga Kid was in the car with them on the drive to Allentown, Pennsylvania. And I don't really see him doing much to back up that story. Now, Snuka in 2015 was officially charged and had stomach cancer at the same time. He was being charged with third-degree murder. He had severe brain damage and couldn't stand trial because he was deemed mentally unfit to stand trial. So the case got thrown out. 10 days later, Snuka died of cancer. And they say you can't overlook his personal life. What happened with Nancy? The violence has been brought up over the years. There is no more separation of the ring and outside of the ring. It is just as influential these days. Now, I will say this. I agree with that as an overall statement. I say it every time people bring up the, about Chris Benoit. You can't separate his professional from his personal life. And whenever people give shit to guys like Hogan and Cena, even though Cena allegedly had cheated on his wife once, and Hogan did cheat on Linda once, although Linda kind of cheated on him. They both kind of cheated on each other. But, everybody was saying they're pieces of shit, and I'm like, really? Stone Cold beat up his wife, and you all still chant Austin 316 and clang beer cans together. So take your hypocrisy somewhere else. If you're going to give one person shit for this, give everybody shit, is how I feel about it. You know what I'm saying? You got to be fair when you're going to do that. If you're going to separate the ring from outside the ring with one wrestler, then you got to do it with all the wrestlers. If you're going to hold people accountable for shit, you got to hold everybody accountable for shit. Go all the way one way or go all the way the other way. But don't do both and mix them up to push a bullshit narrative. And it closes with, justice remains out of reach. And the family feels Nancy keeps calling out to get justice. Now, obviously, what happened with Nancy was horrible. It's a fucked up thing to have happen, especially to her family. I can't imagine a mom losing her daughter, or sisters losing a sister. And, to some degree, Jimmy Snuka did deserve a little bit of justice thrown at him for what he did. Now, before I wrap this up, I'm going to say this is my take on the whole entire thing. Here's my theory on what happened. This is just my opinion. I don't know the truth, but here it is. Do I think Jimmy Snuka killed Nancy Argentino? Yes. Do I think he did it intentionally? No. I truly believe that her death was an accident. But I think the reason Jimmy tried to tell a different story to the police was because he panicked and got nervous. And I think he was afraid if he told what happened, he would go to jail. Because you gotta understand, back then, people bought into your gimmick. If you were a crazy asshole in the ring, they thought you were a crazy asshole outside of the ring. And even though Jimmy was on drugs and had a little bit of behavioral problems, he's not a killer. Because this is a guy who would yell, scream, make threats, but would feel remorse almost immediately after. So either he's the best actor I've ever seen, or he's somebody that just had anger issues. But either way, I think they were either having an argument or they were wrestling. And when he pushed her, she hit her head. And like I said, he was lethargic or sleepy, so he didn't think much about it. But when she wasn't responding, he called an ambulance. See, here's the thing. If you want somebody dead, why are you calling the police or the ambulance? That's my question. Because I believe you want somebody dead, you're not calling the police. You're getting rid of the body. You're going to kill somebody and then you're going to dump the body. And you're going to find some way to make it look like something else happened so you don't get in trouble for it. That's what people do when they have an intent to kill. I don't think Jimmy Snuka had an intent to kill Nancy. But I also think that when they found out, when the cops came by, he told a different story because I think he got nervous and scared that he was going to go to jail. Would he have gone to jail? Maybe. But I think he would have had a good shot at getting some type of probation or beating the case. And worst case scenario, he would have had the wrongful death lawsuit, which the family was more than well within their rights to file. But here's the thing. It's like when you get in an accident. Like, God forbid you hit somebody with your car. If after you hit the person with your car, if you stop the car, get out, check on the body, and call 911, it is ruled as an accident. And you can avoid going to jail. Now, the person can still sue you, but it's no longer viewed as a crime because you stopped to get help for this person. So clearly you weren't trying to kill anyone. But if you hit somebody with your car and you keep driving, that's a hit and run. That's a crime. You're definitely going to jail. Because they're going to assume you wanted this person dead because you kept on going. So that's my theory. That's my story. I think that Jimmy accidentally killed Nancy, but freaked out because he was scared of going to jail. And tried to make up a story. But he was not a good liar. And that's another reason why I don't think he had an intent to kill, because he's not that good an actor. So that's my opinion. And if you guys think differently, feel free to comment below. Tell me what you guys think. Do you think it was an accident? Do you think it was murder? Do you think Jimmy Snuka really wanted to kill her? Comment below with your thoughts. I'm more than happy to share. All I ask is that you keep it civilized. Express your opinion. Feel free to do so. Just don't be rude. Don't be disrespectful. If you're disrespectful, I'll delete and block you. But if you can have a sensible discussion, I'll keep your comment, and I may even reply to it with anything I might want to agree with or retort. And that, ladies and gentlemen, will wrap up this talk of Boochcast reviews Darkside of the Ring. I thank you guys for checking this out. Make sure you guys tune in next week. We're going to have a great one for you guys. We're going to be talking about the assassination of Dino Bravo is coming up next. We'll be talking about that next week. So until then, make sure you guys hit the subscribe button and ring that bell to be notified so you never miss another episode of Boochcast Reviews, Darkside of the Ring, as well as other additional Boochcast YouTube content. Also, make sure you guys are following us on Anchor, Spotify, Breaker, and Google Podcasts. The links to all those are in the description box below. Also, make sure you follow us on all of our social media platforms. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Twitch. Links to everything in the description box. And, of course, support the show through Patreon. Go to patreon.com/theboochcast. Link is in the description box. You guys know the spiel by now, so I ain't got to share it with you. And I'll talk to you guys next time. Until then, pizza, baby!